Hello friends, this is Mike Williams. The following video with Richard Balducci was recorded back in September of 2019. The session ran 5 hours. I released the first hour and 15 minutes back on October 1st of last year, and this is the remainder of that discussion. The link to part 1 is in the description box below, along with the playlist of Richard's presentations on the Beatles and the occult. In part 2, which is this video, I did edit the show to condense the runtime, but rest assured, all the pertinent information is included. The material goes deep into the occult, and because of that, I do recommend listening to the discussion in bite-sized chunks. And so without further ado, here's Richard.
Okay, I think we should get to the Beatles, gosh darn it.
Alrighty, let's go to the Beatles.
I think we need to do a little more clarification and going farther to start with the alleged moped accident. So let's revisit that. Shall we?
We shall.
All right, then. Strap yourself in, because this is going to be even freakier than all the stuff we talked about. What the moped accident, in our last thrilling episode, we realized that it took place December 26, 1965, which is exactly 260 days before the day he got dead, September the 11th, 1966, counting both dates, which was 13 days after the last Beatles concert. The moped accident was actually what's known in occultism as the conception of the corpse. In other words, he was a perfectly fine young man in the prime of life on December 26, 1965. So when he was roughed up and he had bruises and contusions and scrapes and scratches and he chipped a tooth, that is considered the inception, like when the sperm hits the ovum and a pregnancy starts. That is the conception of what will be the corpse at the end of the process. The very first time the wounds and the corpse are starting to become manifest. Because as we know about witchcraft, what it's all about, it's manifesting something, bringing it into fruition and manifestation, or it's banishing something. And I found out something else creepy too. We can get into it a little bit later in depth or not, but the first time that, according to the Beatles Bible, which is an official Beatles source, the very first time that James Paul McCartney admitted to trying LSD was 13 days before the moped accident. And then we get into the Aztecs, the ancient Mayans. They would always give some elixir, intoxicant, mind-altering chemical drug to their sacrificial victims, before the process started. And I have notes on that somewhere else back here. I'll find them later. We can get into specifically what types, and it's pretty mind-boggling.
So the moped accident then, Richard, is really the beginning of the end?
Yes. It's the beginning of the corpse. It's the beginning of taking a perfectly healthy person in the prime of their life, in the genius of their life, and saying, that guy would look better as a corpse, don't you think? It's creepy.
Yeah, it's very creepy.
Now, during the Aztec, like I said, the Aztec Mayan ritual human sacrifices, their prisoners and other people that would be sacrificed were given consciousness-altering substances. So he gets his 13 days before he, starts the process where he will magically pupate into a corpse. Now, sometimes they would take magic mushrooms, and there's hallucinogenic compounds known as psilocybin, and they had an intoxicating drink called Balshay, I believe is how it's pronounced. So there we have ball again, and chi. So that translates as Baal, Ball, Bell plus chi, which means life force or life energy, life breath. It's also known as ki, qui, chi, chai, prana. There's all kinds of names for it. So that name, Balchi, actually combines Baal, which is Moloch, we know, and the life force. They're basically saying your life now belongs to Baal. There was also a compound known as Tolosh. It's spelled Toloache, and that was a plant native to Mexico. It still is. That was also used as a ritual plant. And it was known variously as the Indian apple, and it was known as an apple core, and it was also known as moonflower. And keep in mind, when James Paul McCartney died by September the 11th, 1966, the moon had actually completed 300 orbits of the Earth in his lifetime. So that ties in with the whole moonflower aspect on his satanic ritual human sacrifice. Another hallucinogenic aspect of Tolash is the fact that it is the main component in witchcraft spells to cause infatuation. And thus Tolash is known as the plant of both love and death. It's also known as the devil's herb, and it's used as a consciousness-altering drug during the occult ritual. So the fact that James Paul McCartney first consumed hallucinogenic LSD exactly 13 days before his moped accident, is another highly significant occult signature that this is a satanic ritual human sacrifice in disguise behind the scenes. So that brings us to the moped accident, and then his offing 260 days. And we went into that already about the Mayan Aztec calendar being 260 days. Mark Devlin has mentioned that, and he's actually, I love him, but he's got that just slightly off. The 260-day calendar is not solar-based. It's based on the human gestation cycle, which is normally around 260 days. So since it's the human gestation cycle, that ties into the birth of the corpse and the conception of the corpse during the moped accident. It's the starting point of the corpse.
Right.
Now, another thing, we know that James Paul McCartney became dead on September the 11th, 1966. If you go to the Sgt. Pepper's album, I think it's George, he points at the line where it says, Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins. Nick actually got me on this path because actually George is not pointing at the first part of the sentence. He's pointing literally where it says 5 o'clock as the day begins. He's pointing at the 5 o'clock point. So we can forget about the first point of that sentence and focus on the 5 o'clock. James Paul McCartney, according to that occult signature, was ritually sacrificed at exactly 5 hours after midnight, 5 o'clock a.m., and 5 o'clock a.m. after midnight is exactly 300 minutes after midnight, which exactly equals the 300 orbits of the moon around the earth during his entire lifetime.
So, Richard, is that 5 hours after?
It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
5 o'clock in the morning.
Before sunrise.
So the stories about him dying later at night, or being in the car crash later at night, how do we reconcile that then?
Well, by my occultology, it actually makes more sense if you think about it, because it gives Brian Epstein and the handlers a little bit more time to lasso in William, which according to memoirs they did the next day. So they had most of September the 11th by the time they found out, whatever time they found out from that day, to do it. Now, the interesting thing here, remember, is on September the 11th, the day they offed him, 300 minutes after midnight, the time of the hours of darkness and light on September the 11th, 1966, as well as September the 11th, 2001, there were 11 hours of darkness, and then there were 13 hours of daylight. I misspoke in the last transmission. I said 14 hours, so I'm correcting myself. Even I can make a boo-boo. I'm human. So, as we know, 11 hours of darkness equals 660 minutes of darkness on that date. And then the 13 hours of daylight is an extra 60 minutes plus 60 minutes of light.
Richard, what about, let me ask this question. Some people want to debate, argue about whether September 11th was the date that that biological Paul McCartney died. Some people want to say it's August. Some people want to say it's November. And my argument has been, since I've been looking at this, is that the September 11th date is so important in the occult circles that any other date just doesn't seem to make sense when you put it into the context of the occult.
Right. And here's another reason why it strongly indicates 5 o'clock a.m., 10 miles north on the Dewsbury Road, according to Magical Mystery Tour. During James Paul McCartney's entire lifetime, Pluto, the planet of death and regeneration, moved exactly 44 degrees in the heavens. Now, a degree from our perspective on Earth, looking up at the ecliptic, the path of the sun, our sun covers exactly 1/2 degree. The same with a full moon. It covers 1/2 a degree. So if Pluto, the planet of death and regeneration, moved 44 degrees during the entire lifetime of James Paul McCartney, that is the length of 88 suns. If you lined up from our Earth perspective, the way the sun and the moon appear at 1/2 degree wide, if you lined up 88 suns or 88 moons, you would have the length in degrees that Pluto, the planet of death and regeneration, moved. Now, my point here with 88 is this. James Paul McCartney died exactly 88 minutes before sunrise on September the 11th, 1966. The sun rose in London, England, 10 miles north of the Dewsbury Road at exactly 6:28 a.m. on the London Greenwich timeline. And keep in mind that Abbey Road is also situated upon 0 degrees Greenwich timeline. So black magic occultists and sorcerers and witches and warlocks and politicians, or, these bad people, the black magic occultists know, and the witches and warlocks know, and the Satanists know, they're all keenly aware that officially, anyway, there are 88 constellations in the heavens. So the 88 minutes before sunrise also coordinates with the 300 and the 300 lunar orbits in his lifetime, because this means that for each minute that he was dead before the sun rose, 88 minutes later, that was 1 minute per constellation. You know,
yeah,
that's how they get their kicks.
This really says to me that Paul McCartney's death was very, very important from an occult perspective. In other words, it wasn't just your run-of-the-mill rock star death. That there was a lot behind his dying.
And there's more to come.
Okay.
88 minutes, by the way, also equals 5,280 seconds. And 5,280 seconds perfectly resonates with the number of feet in 1 mile. So everything's about weights and measures, and it's all tabulated, you know, beyond what we would even conceive of. It's a precise chronometer, you know, Chronos, Saturn, the black sun. It's all measured out.
It's all calculated.
Imagine, you know, living your life not knowing that there's groups of people, they've already got your death time to the second. To the second. You know, look at JFK. They drove him, if you look at Dealey Plaza, it's an inverted pyramid with the capstone missing where the railroad tracks cross. And the precise time that he was shot dead during frame 313, and you went into that, at that exact moment, it was 12:30. Well, back in 1963, they didn't have too many digital clocks. One of the first ones was on top of the Dallas book depository building. There was actually a digital clock, one of the early ones up there, and it said 12:30. But if you go by a rotary clock, at 12:30, you have one hand pointing at the 12, you have the other hand pointing at the 6. So we've got 6 at the bottom, and we've got 6 plus 6 at the top. That's another occult signature, 666. And of course, that's when his head's blown off in frame 313. And then, but he's officially pronounced dead 30 minutes later at exactly 1300 hours, 1 o'clock, you know.
Yeah. And when you said the 666 at 12:30, the 12 o'clock is 6 plus 6, plus the 6 at the bottom of the clock. I just want to clarify that for anybody who's listening and might have lost track of how we got 3 6s.
Right. Thank you for your clarification. I was a little confused myself.
Thank God I'm here.
Yeah. Hey, you from your mouth to God's ear, I'll drink to that, pal. You know, what would we all be doing if this all didn't happen? If this happened to the Bay City Rollers, you know, we wouldn't care.
No.
The poor Bay City Rollers.
I liked Saturday Night. I thought it was a pretty good song.
That might have been their one only good song. Please don't say that now that it's going to be in the back of my brainasium, you know, bouncing around off the walls in there tonight.
What I'll do is I'll put a clip of the Bay City Rollers in at this part of our discussion so everybody can get the full picture.
The occult meaning of Bay City Roller. No. Let's not do that. Well, I think we should now segue a little bit into Beetlejuice.
Yes.
Yes, Beetlejuice. Yes. Let me find what I did with Beetlejuice here.
Was it Michael Keaton that starred in that movie? It was, right?
Yes, it was, and I did his horoscope, and there's some interesting things there, but we don't have to get into him right now. On the day that James Paul McCartney was born, you recall in our last episode that the sun was at 26 degrees Gemini, the twins. At the same time, it was in opposition to the Earth, which was placed at 26 degrees Sagittarius, which is where the supposed womb of the Milky Way galaxy, galactic center, is there. So that's part of the reason why James Paul McCartney was selected. But I did a little more research, and I found out that on June 18th, 1942, the day that James Paul McCartney was born on Earth, the sun, our sun, was exactly conjunct Betelgeuse. So Betelgeuse, it's spelled a couple of different ways, but essentially it's in Orion, the constellation of Orion, which the three belts of Orion point right at the sacred star, Sepsothis Sirius. So when you look at the constellation of Orion, Betelgeuse, the red supergiant, is on the right shoulder of Orion, but it's if you were Orion, it would be your right shoulder, but us looking at Orion, it appears it's on the left side of his shoulder from the Earth. So my point here is this. James Paul McCartney, on the day he was born, with the sun being conjunct Betelgeuse, the mass of Betelgeuse is 20 times the mass of our own sun. The mass of our own sun is equal to 333,000 Earth masses. So everybody break out your calculators here, because you're going to love this. The mass of the sun, 333,000 Earth masses, times 20 equals 6,660,000 Earth masses. Just another coinky-dink. And this is all exactly opposite the womb of the Milky Way galaxy. That's the big occult secret about Betelgeuse. So don't say the name 3 times.
You know, in the occult, they do say if you say something 3 times, you can invoke the spirit. I think it was Donovan that mentioned that. Was it in Memoirs where he said if you say somebody's name was deceased 3 times, that you actually will bring them forth? Don't quote me on that, but I remember, I believe it was Donovan who said that.
That is exactly like the 3 fates, and it's also like the moon, because the moon, it has 4 phases, but one is invisible. When the new moon is at the sun, the moon is invisible, for 2 days before the new moon. You see the thin crescent, waning crescent. 2 days after, when the moon reappears, it appears as the waning crescent. So my point here is this. When the moon is at the first quarter phase, that is known as the young maiden, the young woman, like Diana, the moon goddess. And then when the moon is full, at its most beautiful, that's when the woman is the most beautiful, when she's ripe and at the prime of her beauty is the full moon. And then the third quarter moon, or the last quarter moon it's sometimes called, is what's called in occultism and witchcraft as the old crone moon, because that's when you banish something at that cycle. When you hit the last quarter moon, if you want to banish something, that's when you're invoking those spells. When the moon is invisible, it's actually at its most powerful. If you want something to come into manifestation, you would do your little ritual, say your prayers or whatever at that time. And then, we all know the effect of the moon on tides. on Earth, and our bodies are supposedly 70% water. The surface of the Earth is 70% water. There's something deep there. And also, just like our tears are salt water, so is the ocean is salt water. And, that makes me think that there's been so much misery and heartache and death and suffering and Satanism and all this black magic sorcery going on and killing and disrespect that maybe symbolically, at least, if not actually, there were so many tears shed by so many souls and people over all the lifetimes that have come before us on planet Earth, that maybe that's why the ocean is salt water. It's all the tears of all of us accumulated that have cried over all these things.
Yeah.
And witches can't cry. They have no empathy. They get off on suffering. In fact, it's the opposite. That's how they do these things.
It's funny you should say that, because I was reading an article, the Playboy article going back to 1980 that John Lennon was in, where Yoko Ono had to check the interviewer out first by running an astrological background check, if you will, right? And in that article, he states that, not that she doesn't cry, but he said that she doesn't smile.
I picked up on that. That was such an insightful comment by that author. Yes, and I was so glad you did that video at the time, because, it showed that to the extent that they plan witches and all that out. And by the way, I hate to, break people's hearts, but Yoko Ono is a witch. We'll get to her later. Now, here's something interesting to kind of finish up with Beetlejuice here for a few minutes. In ancient Babylon, the Orion constellation was named Mo-Sipa Ziana, which translates as the heavenly shepherd. So who'd have thunk that? And it's also translated as the true shepherd of Anu. So that's doubly interesting to me, with James Paul McCartney being born at 26 degrees Gemini, the twins, when the sun is conjunct Beetlejuice, whose mass is equal to 6,660,000 Earth masses. That star is known as the Shepherd Star. And then you have William Wallace Shepherd, who took his spot, took over the role. So you could actually say that William is the true shepherd of Paul McCartney. Now, the Akkadian name for Orion was Sitadaru, and it was also called Sidalu, and both of them translate from Akkadian into English as the loyal shepherd of heaven. So Beetlejuice is also the loyal shepherd of heaven. And Akkad, the Akkadians, were centered, they were the heirs, essentially, of the Sumerians. And they were located north of ancient Babylon, along the Euphrates River. Now, the name of the red supergiant star Betelgeuse in the witches' gematria adds up to 606, by the way, on top of it. You know what else adds up to 606? Melchizedek, Crowley, Darth Vader, Graveyard Sorcerer, Hope and Change. And it also, 606 in the witches' gematria is the Royal Arch and the Black Art. Now, how the witches' gematria is computed is different from simple gematria, where A is 1, B is 2, 3 is C. In the witches' gematria, each letter increases by 6. So A is 6, B is 12, C is 18, etc., etc., etc. That's why I use a lot of time the witches' gematria for this stuff, even more than the Hebrew gematria. But that's just me. Okay, so the movie Beetlejuice was released on March the 30th, 1988. So there's your 33.
Or 6.
Yeah, or 6. Take your pick. Pick your poison. Whichever one you want. And the movie Beetlejuice happens to be 92 minutes long. So 92 minutes times 60 seconds per minute equals 5,520 seconds is the length of the movie Beetlejuice. Essentially, if you take 6.06 and times it by 911, you get the length of the running time of Beetlejuice, 5,520 seconds.
Well, 92 minutes results in the master number of 11, too.
Yes. Yes, Sage. Yes. You've done it again.
Every once in a while, I'll pipe in with something.
Oh, you're solid gold. You're solid gold. Now, here's something even creepier. From the date that the movie Beetlejuice was released on March 30th, 1988, to the date that John Lennon died in a pool of blood red Beetlejuice on December 8th, 1980, spans a period of 2,670 days, counting both dates. So essentially, 666 days plus 666 days plus 666 days plus 666 days plus 6 days equals 2,670 days from the day Beetlejuice was released to the day John Lennon was released from his life here on Earth. 666 times 4 plus 6, just for good measure.
So, Richard, why would you put Beetlejuice, the movie Beetlejuice, as a stake in the ground? I'm trying to understand that myself. Is it because you've determined that the movie itself has great occult significance?
Yes, it does. In fact, if you look at the Winona Ryder character, she's like basically a young witch. They call her goth or goth in that movie, whichever way you want to pronounce it, but she wears all black. She's basically, symbolically, she's a witch learning about witchcraft in the movie. Now, the movie Beetlejuice was also, released on March 30th, 1988, exactly 606 months plus 7 days plus 7 days plus 7 days after the alleged birth date of William Wallace Shepard on September 9th, 1937.
So 66 and 777s?
Yeah.
That's very important because the 66, as we know, is very important with memoirs. And the 777s, if I'm not mistaken, is the lightning flash through the Kabbalah.
Yes,
Crowley.
yes. And then Aleister Crowley, he has his 777.
Yes, okay. Very interesting.
When will it end?
I don't think it's ever going to end.
Interestingly, last thing we'll talk about Beetlejuice here, I guess, is the fact that in the witches' gematria, the spelling of the movie version of Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, it adds up to 582 in the witches' gematria. And guess what else does? The Beatles.
It's just a coincidence, Richard. That's all.
Oh, okay. I can scratch that one off then. Okay, what do you want to talk about next?
Well, I think we're going to talk about the Cavern Club.
Oh, the Cavern Club, eh? Well, that is very interesting. It's interesting, too, that speaking of the Cavern Club, Brian Epstein meets the Beatles, that version of the Beatles, at high noon at the Cavern Club, November 9th, 1961. There's a 9/11. And he's meeting the boys in a cave at high noon. Keep that in mind, because the very last time we see the Beatles, who are actually, at this point, they have morphed into the Cheetles with False Paul. They're walking away from the Abbey Road studios on the Witch's Crosswalk, and that was taken at high noon on that day, which was August 8th, 1969. So the last time we see him is at high noon in the daylight. When the manager meets him, it's in the darkness of the cave at noon, and then they're leaving, going bye-bye, Abbey Road Studios, bye-bye now, at high noon.
So they began at high noon and they left
at high noon. And on that album cover, George is the only Beatle looking exactly dead on at that obelisk at the Witch's Fork, the Edward Onslow Ford obelisk memorial. He's the only one. He's the last in the procession, and he's looking right at the obelisk. And supposedly there were only 6 pictures taken, and they just so happened to use that one. You know.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah, it's nonsense.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Now, the thing about the Cavern Club, too, to remember, is the Cavern Club is in the form of an ancient Egyptian tomb. Yes! Let me say that again. The Cavern Club is in the form of an ancient Egyptian tomb, complete with an ancient Egyptian false door in the background behind the Beatles. Now, what the false doors were used for in the ancient Egyptian tombs was a way for the spirits to come and go, because they would take food and offerings and wine and drink, and they'd leave it in the tombs, and then the spirits could come and go and absorb the energy from the food like we talked about, you know. So when you see the first time that footage that was played on television, the first time the Beatles are ever shown on British television, it's a footage taken at the Cavern Club. And you can look, if you look real close, you'll see the outline of a false door there. Plus, they're playing away merrily underneath another arch of Baal Ball. And also, they're playing beneath a crescent, which is the top half of a circle, a dome. And in ancient Egypt, the half circle, top of a half circle dome was the letter T. As in Beatles. In the logo Beatles, the T is bigger. It extends down.
And right in the center.
Right in the center. Yeah. So actually it's also the symbol for rising. In ancient Egypt, they would bake bread in kind of a dome shape as offerings. So what do we have with the Beatles at the Cavern Club in the Egyptian tomb? They're rising into prominence. And so they're playing in front of that false door too. And, you know, the Beatles are kind of becoming false gods in a way, you know, with the whole magic aspect of it. And the rising of the Beatles, that's where it takes place, in the tomb known as the Cavern Club. Okay, the Cavern Club also opened on the night of a full moon, and it opened on January the 16th, 1957. It was a Wednesday. The sun was at 26 degrees Capricorn. 26 degrees is 13 plus 13. And the sun was 13 degrees away from exact opposition to the sacred star, Sepsothis Sirius, on the date the Cavern Club opened. Interestingly, too, on that same date, Pluto was at 29 degrees Leo, so that means Pluto was exactly conjunct the royal star Regulus, which is the heart of the lion in the constellation of Leo. And of course, James Paul McCartney was known as the heart of the Beatles. The date that the Cavern Club opened, by the way, January the 16th, is 1/16. So you've got a 9/11 backwards and inverted. Ha! I beat you on that one.
Yeah, you did beat me on that one. Very good, Richard.
Scored another point.
Very good. In fact, just to pause for a second here, Tom sent me an email and said that certain pages in memoirs that contain certain information, the page numbers are encoded with occulted numbers. So like page 116 in memoirs. In fact, I do think that there's something on page 116 of memoirs that's... Oh, okay, so here we go. So on page 116 of the Blue Book, the new memoirs, is a footnote. He's talking about the 9/11 date, and he's talking about the significance of the 9/11 date in history. So what Richard just said about 116 being the inverted 9/11, that's what's coded into memoirs on page 116. It is the inverted 9/11. So if I turn the book around, upside down, on page 116, I get 9/11, and the footnote on that book talks about the significance of the 9/11 date in the occult. So I just want to point that out.
I'm glad you did that. And from the date that the Cavern Club first opened on January 16th, 1957, to the date, according to memoirs, the date that James Paul McCartney and John Winston Lennon made their ceremonial blood oath to Lucifer pact, that was on October 24th, 1963, according to memoirs. That is exactly 6 years plus 9 months plus 9 days, which equals another manifestation of 666. So anyway, Cavern Club in the Witches' Gematria also adds up to 606, by the way. Just like Beetlejuice, just like Crowley, just like Melchizedek. Okay, we've talked about the tomb that is the Cavern Club. Now let's talk about the Abbey Road Studios. Abbey Road is an Egyptian temple to sound magic. No kidding. The Beatles and everybody working at EMI Studios, Abbey Road Studios, when they crossed the street to get to there, going from east to west across the Witches' crosswalk at the Witches' Fork, Abbey Road, they crossed across 6 white stripes. They crossed in between the number 13 because you've got the obelisk on the left, the number 1, and you've got Abbey Road Studios, which is at number 3, Abbey Road. And then they walk up 9 steps to get through the door at Abbey Road Studios, where they cross between an 11. You know, in the doorway is a 1 and a 1, 11. So there's a 9/11. Just going to work. So,
well, it's representative of the Masonic twin pillars.
Yes.
That's what I noticed.
Yes. Thank you. So every day the Beatles went to work there. They were working at an Egyptian temple to sound magic. And keep in mind that they were putting out magic circles that we called, records and albums. 45, 4 plus 5 is 9. And then they're putting out 33 and a third. long playing albums, so that's 9. It just never ends with these people. Now, okay, let's talk about the occult meaning behind the name Abbey Road. The ancient Egyptian word ab, A-B, means heart. And Bay, B-E-Y, means boy. The Beatles were a boy band, and James Paul McCartney was the heart, the ab of the Beatles. You know, on the dollar bill where it says on the Great Seal, order, ab, KO,
Yes.
which is translated one way as order out of chaos, which is correct, but there's an even deeper esoterica in play there. Since ab means heart, you have the heart in the middle of order and chaos. So it's basically the heart deciding, choosing between order or chaos.
I was going to say, didn't Billy put a CD out called Chaos and Creation?
Yeah, in the backyard. Good point, Sage.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sage just scored a point. James Paul McCartney, of course, was the heart of the Beatles, a boy band. Abbey, Bay means boy, person, or prince. The first British heart transplant was actually performed exactly 600 days after the death of the heart of the Beatles on September the 11th, 1966. So you could say William Wallace Shepard was a heart transplant into the Beatles, you know. And also, too, this reaffirms it, because on the cover of the first album that William Wallace Shepard portraying Paul McCartney is the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. And you said in another transmission very alertly that the new Beatles are all playing wind instruments there.
Right, right.
Well, William Wallace Shepard, posing as fake Paul on the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, is actually holding what's known as a cor anglais instrument. And in Latin, that translates into English as angel heart. So the new Paul is holding an angel heart on the cover of his first album. So, you know, the Beatles were pumping out magic circles. And, you know, they're essentially musical spells that are still active and in power today. You know, when I learn like the latest horror about the Beatles, I oftentimes go back and listen to the pre-1967 Beatles especially. Is just something about that music. It was pure.
So did you want to go to, are we still talking about Abbey Road, or did you want to go to the eggman and the walrus?
Yes, Abbey Road bores me now. I'm bored with that topic. Let's talk about...
No, if you're not finished with it, no. What I'm saying is if you're not finished, we could finish it up and then we can move on.
All right, well, there's a little gematria about Abbey Road. It's interesting. In the Hebrew gematria, Abbey Road tallies to 545. The same as Pentagrammaton, Dark Souls, Sun and Moon, 313, like frame 313 in the Zapruder film. If you write it out, 313, that comes to 545. Also, hidden rulers, Penieli, hexagram of Belial, which is another name for Baal, as if he needed another name. And also Luciferian Gotia. Gotia, of course, is Greek for witchcraft. And Satanic Masons, all total to 545. There's more, but I think that's all the home audience can handle, you know.
Okay.
All right, let's go to that Eggman and the Walrus thing, because that really bugs me. It's so obvious. Why don't they get this? All right, I'm not going to really go into the the Humpty Dumpty aspect, okay? Although there was a version of the first book of Humpty Dumpty, Mother Goose, was illustrated by a guy named William Wallace. So that's a little trivia for you. But skipping over the whole Humpty Dumpty and Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass aspects, which are in play, of course, it's very simple. Who is the Eggman? Who is the walrus? Well, we've been told the walrus was Paul, but we're not sure. The Eggman ties into Christianity's mystery about the death and resurrection of Jesus. And because at Easter time, which is always the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, that's when Easter is. The Eggman, Easter egg, symbolizing rebirth and, rabbits breed a lot and all this, symbolizes Jesus, essentially. He's the Eggman, So who's the walrus? Well, the Eggman is the resurrected James Paul McCartney. The Eggman is William Wallace Shepard. The walrus is James Paul McCartney because the word walrus in the French language is Morse, as in Morse code. But in Latin language, the language of the dead, the word Morse translates into English as corpse or dead. So James Paul McCartney is the corpse. He's the walrus. The walrus is the corpse.
Okay, so when John tells us, here's another clue for you all, the walrus was Paul.
It's a lot deeper than people took it. Yes.
Okay. All right. And the Eggman then is Billy.
Right. And there's your twins. There's your death and resurrection. That's your modern day Jesus. Paulism. The whole Paulism aspect.
That's very good, Richard. It's very succinct because there's a lot of people that have written dissertations on this.
Oh, really?
Trying to figure out, what the encoding is. And you just basically summarized it in 1 minute. So. Very good. And none of them said what you said.
All right.
As far as I know. So good job.
All right. Yay for Team Ricky. Now, I Am the Walrus, by the way. It has these dramatic lines, from King Lear, added to the Cheadle song, I Am the Walrus. They added that on September 29th, 1967, so there's another 9/11 there. At around 4 minutes and 14 seconds in the song with the Shakespeare lines, I Am the Walrus, you hear, oh, untimely death, that part? Well, those lines are spoken at 4 minutes and 14 seconds into the song, and it takes approximately 6 seconds to say, oh, untimely death. At that point of the song, 4 minutes and 20 seconds of the song have transpired, which equals exactly 260 seconds, which is the Aztec Mayan calendar resonance. 260 seconds, 260 days. The walrus is dead. Oh, untimely death. Yada, yada. And the interesting thing, too, about I Am the Walrus, the song ends with what is known as a shepherd's tone, as in William Wallace Shepard. A shepherd tone is a sound consisting of superposition of sine waves separated by octaves. So it's played with the bass pitch tone moving upward or downward, and it's referred to as the shepherd scale. And the shepherd scale, shepherd tone actually creates what's known as an auditory illusion, a sound illusion, a sound magic of a tone that's continually either ascending or continually descending in pitch, but ultimately it gets no higher or lower. And the way to picture a shepherd's tone visually is what's going on with a barbershop pole, which has the red and white stripes, and it's spinning, so it looks like it's going up, and yet it gets no higher. So that's like the optical illusion version, which is easier to picture than the audio version. But there are examples of it, especially in I Am the Walrus. That's how it ends, in a shepherd's tone. That was another clue. That was another occult signature for those in the know. Like a joke, almost.
It's just incredible what they did as far as inserting clues into the songs. You know, the King Lear narrative and all that. It's just the timing. The timing and the calculating of this is mind-boggling.
Right. I guess they mostly did it because they couldn't talk about it outwardly. You know, they had to deal with it somehow. It was probably driving them all crazy, especially with William being the taskmaster, you know, the head guy in charge. Yeah. That must have been a really lonely time for the three surviving Beatles, you know.
Either that or they just walked out and said, you know what? You do it. You know, I'm going down to the pub to get a beer.
I hope that's the way it was, yeah. Because they're all locked into contracts. You know, they have to do it. The money's already probably been spent that a lot of people upfronted, you know, during those contracts. They made a deal with the devil just on that. And they got away with it so far.
Yeah, it's kind of catching up, though, Richard. You know, the work that you're doing, I'm doing, and others are doing. It'll be interesting to see over time how this plays out.
It will be interesting. There's no doubt about that. Well, shall we take a fresh look at the cover of the Magical Mystery Tour album? When we look at that cover, we see the individual titles of the songs, right? Oh, there's this song, there's that song, there's that. It's not designed to be read that way. It's designed to be read as 6 different complete sentences. The first one's the title, Magical Mystery Tour. The second line should be read all together. The fool on the hill flying blue jay way. The third line, your mother should know I am the walrus. The fourth line, hello, goodbye, strawberry fields forever. The fifth line, Penny Lane, baby, you're a rich man. And the sixth line, all you need is love. So if we dissect those lines, the first and the last, Magical Mystery Tour and All You Need Is Love, is pretty self-explanatory. But, you know, the fool on the hill flying blue jay way is Paul's soul flying into the sky from his eternal resting place on the hill. Your mother should know that I am the walrus actually means your mother should know that I am the corpse. Hello, goodbye forever, strawberry fields. That's kind of self-explanatory. Penny Lane, baby, you're a rich man. Now, essentially.
Well, and you know, the other thing, Richard, is when you look at the front cover, and I just noticed this as you were speaking. I don't know why I've never taken a closer look at it. But the songs at the top of the album jacket are in the form of an arch.
Oh, I didn't even think of that, Sage. Great work. You've done it again, Sage. Archer Bale Ball Bell, yeah.
And then it says includes a 24-page full-color picture book. So 24, there we have the 6 again.
And one for each hour of the day, too.
Yep.
And isn't the 24th letter of the alphabet the X? So you've got the witch's cross there. And a cross in the Greek alphabet, Chi, adds up to 600 also.
Right. Yeah, I covered that in my Stanshall video.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Very good, Richard.
Well, now we come to our favorite topic lately, the Dakota building, which we all know the Rosemary's Baby connection, so we don't have to revisit that quite yet. The Dakota building was listed as a National Historic Landmark, NHL, on December 8th, 1976, exactly 4 years to the day before John Lennon was ritually murdered beneath the Arch of Baal Ball Bell at the Dakota building. In the south entrance, by the way, on top of it. Now we come to a point where it gets real interesting about the Dakota building. And it also ties in to the memoirs of Billy Shears. Essentially, archaeoccultology and the memoirs of Billy Shears are on a collision course here in this production. There's no way around it. They're coming together here, and one is going to either prove that the other is totally phony and fake, or they're going to reinforce each other. So we'll let the audience decide what happens. So, taking a little bit of information from the memoirs of Billy Shears, adding to the history of the Dakota building, check this out. On the date that the Freemasonic foundation stone, a foundation stone, by the way, in Freemasonry is when you dig out the basement of a building, that's the first stone down in the darkness below ground is the foundation stone. And then the cornerstone is the first block above ground. And the cornerstone is almost always in the northeast, where the sun is at its peak in the northeast on the summer solstice, you know, when it rises. So that's where usually the cornerstone is. So the foundation stone on the Dakota building was laid on October 25th, 1880. Now strap yourself in for this, because we're going to have a series here. From the date that the foundation stone was placed in the Dakota building on October 25th, 1880, to the date that James Paul McCartney and John Lennon took their ceremonial blood oath to Lucifer on October 24th, 1963, spans a total of 996 months, including both dates, 996. Recall now, from the date that Brian Epstein first met the Beatles at noon at the Cavern Club on November 9th, 1961, to the date of the cremation ritual of John Lennon on December 10th, 1980, 2 days after his death, spans a total of 996 weeks. The height of the obelisk in the middle of St. Peter's Square stands exactly 996 inches tall, which is interesting considering that John Lennon said the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. So, in the witch's gematria, the words September 11 add up to exactly 996. So 666, everybody knows that that's the devil's number, you know, in the lore and mysticism. 996 is actually Lucifer's number. because in the gematria, literally, the words Lucifer's number add up to 996 in the witches' gematria, as does secret society, as does one world order, as does let my people go, as does twin towers, as does Anuit Septis, which the Masons always mispronounce on TV as coeptus. No, Masons, bad Masons, bad. It's Septis, as in sept, the sacred star. Anuit Septis. The word September 11, 996. The words Sax Coburg Gotha, which was the actual name of the Windsors, the people that call themselves the Windsors now. Sax Coburg Gotha adds up to 996. That was their name. Light and darkness, army of Satan, eternal damnation, and Chateau d'Amory. That's the castle in Belgium that the Mothers of Darkness cult is based out of. The Chateau d'Amory. And here's a chilling offshoot of that. Amory is spelled, or Amory, if you want to French it up, is spelled Amerois. The root word of America is Ammer. And Ammer means a ritual sacrifice. So the whole United States is being set up for a ritual sacrifice at some time. Think about it. The guy steps foot on Plymouth Rock, the Pilgrims, on the winter solstice, the day of the sun's death, in the year 1620. The first president, George Washington, he's sworn in on the witches' Sabbath, April the 30th, 1789, 13 years after the Declaration of Independence in 1776. The first architect who designed the layout of Washington, D.C., Pierre L'Enfant, who was a Freemason, he was paid the sum in the year 1810 by the U.S. Congress for his efforts in designing the layout of Washington, D.C., the sum of $666 plus 66 cents. Got to have that 66 cents in there. The first monument, official monument in the United States is the Devil's Tower. You know, we can sit here all day and do this. So the United States, what I'm trying to get around to, is it's being set up for a ritual sacrifice. Well, what do you do when you do a satanic ritual sacrifice? You sacrifice the best. You sacrifice James Paul McCartney, the cute Beatle. You sacrifice Sharon Tate. You sacrifice the United States of America because you've built it up into the biggest, most powerful country on earth. What else do you do when you are about to do a ritual sacrifice? You fatten up the calf. You fatten it up. We're the fattest nation in the history of planet Earth. The national debt is so out of control. If we cut down every tree in the United States, we wouldn't have enough tree to make the paper to print all the dollar bills to pay for it. It's just not going to happen. So, you know, when they have a new war, there's all these things, the budget that Congress always fights about. Oh, we can't afford a wall, on the southern border. Yeah, we can't. That's too expensive. Or we can't afford health care for everybody. But for the next war, we'll just put it on the tab. We'll put it on the national debt because we're not going to pay it anyway. We're just running up the tab like the mafia, like in Goodfellas. You run up the charges, you take the deliveries in the front door, you sell it out the back for half, you sell all, you strip it, and then when you can't wring another dollar out of it, you torch it, you burn it to the ground, you destroy it, you sacrifice it. That's what they're getting ready to do to the United States of America.
Obviously, this is very disconcerting because it says that there is knowledge and control over future events, which includes people, decades, centuries, millennia in advance. I mean, this is how I'm kind of understanding this. And it seems impossible that it can only be by humans to be able to do this level of planning, because humans only have a certain shelf life with regard to how long they live. So it says to me that there is an unseen, otherworldly involvement in all of this that is overseeing, overlooking, ensuring that there's continuity in whatever the plan is that was laid out. Does that seem like something that crossed your mind as well, or am I?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Sage. You know, unfortunately, it's tough to go there because, we're getting into nutty territory there a little bit, but it's the only thing that makes sense. It's like a fruit fly, I think, only lives a couple of days. So to a fruit fly, we're gods. They think, man, those humans, they never die, man. My buddy, Freddy the Fly, he's dead now. But this guy, he's walking around. He's a god.
Well, that's why when certain people pass away that are on the dark side, we'll pick on George Bush Sr. And people are happy about the fact that he's no longer with us. But what I've always said is, yes, I mean, he's not here anymore to inflict any of his harm or his ideology onto the world, but nothing changes. You see what I'm saying? He comes and goes.
The beat goes on.
He was just a cog in the wheel.
Right.
At the end of the day.
The skull and bonesman, George H.W. Bush. It's interesting that you brought him up. His real name is George Scherf Jr., by the way. And George H.W. Bush, I don't know if most people know it. I'm sure you do, that he participated in the ritual sacrifice of President John F. Kennedy. He was actually arrested that day in Dealey Plaza, by the way. And there are at least 2 surviving pictures of him in Dealey Plaza after he went in for like 45 minutes or an hour, and then he got out after he made a phone call.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, George Herbert Walker Bush's funeral was on December 5th, 2018. Exactly 660 months plus 13 days after November 22nd, 1963. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever see that footage of him where he laughs about President Kennedy at the funeral of Gerald Ford?
Yes. Yep. I've seen that footage.
Because, all of us laugh when we hear the phrase deluded gunman. God.
Yeah, I was told by 2 researchers who have been involved in the Kennedy assassination that he was the paymaster. He was the one writing the checks.
And that's why George Herbert Walker Bush, when he died, he had a traitor's flag on his casket during his service. The flag was upside down, for one thing. It was untucked. It was unstarched. It's wrinkly. And if you look real close, here's the big key. On his flag, compared to almost all the other presidents, like President Kennedy, when they got dead, their flag had big white stars in the blue field. But his stars are tiny instead of the large white stars. So that tells me the Masons and whoever that orchestrate all this, yes, he was good for our team. He did a lot of evil, but he's still a traitor. And we, believe it or not, we have a ritual for that. we have a ritual where it looks like in public that we're mourning and, oh, you know how they talked about it for a week. Oh, he was such a great, thank God. He was a gentle, kind man. He brought decency to the presidency. Well, that's one way to look at it, but the non-idiotic way to look at it is he was a tool. They used him till the day he dropped dead, and they gave him a traitor's flag. Look real close. He's got the little tiny stars. He didn't deserve. He can't have a big flag. He can't have a flag that's pristine. You never see somebody in the service, which he was. He did serve our country, doing God knows what. You know, they wouldn't allow him the dignity to be honored the way President Kennedy, who's a martyr, or all the other presidents practically. You know, for those in the know, they're telling you, we're saying he's a traitor. We're saying he's a schmuck, but you can't see it. You never see a wrinkled flag or a flag that's just like tossed on almost, you know. And when they took him out of the, I guess it was St. Patrick's Cathedral where he was at, or whatever cathedral they took him out upside down. They took him out head first, I believe. No, they took him out feet first.
Feet first, coming out of the cathedral?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the footage. I remember they took him out the opposite way. Normally your head, when you're laying in your coffin during a funeral service at a church, your head is towards the altar. But his feet were. So they took him out feet first.
So why do you think they considered him a traitor? That's where I'm a little confused. If he was doing work on their behalf, there was something, I guess, about him that didn't cut it as far as the upper echelon of Masonry goes.
Right. It's just, you know, even though there's a good side to Masonry and a not so good side, believe it or not, there's actually great people that won't let these people get away with it. Now, they obviously didn't have the power to stop him from being involved in the JFK assassination. And by the way, he became head of the CIA 13 years after the JFK assassination, when he said he'd never been in the CIA, but they made him the head of the CIA. Go figure. So There are great Masons and good people and whatever that they do what they can, you know, to show what's really going on. They win little battles here and there. We haven't won the war yet, but we win little battles here or there.
I know they had the flags half-mast for like 30 days for him, and I was just beside myself. You know, I just thought, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, and also what was weird, too, I have a note here, the 8 pallbearers that carried George H.W. Bush's, George Scherf Jr.'s traitor's flag-draped casket out of the National Cathedral slightly swayed back and forth on each step out of the cathedral. So that's some weird occult signature there, too. You know, normally when somebody's carrying a coffin, they're really careful and they try to be almost step with each other, but they're actually doing this back and forth swaying in unison.
Yeah.
It's weird.
All right, where are we going next?
Oh, golly gee. Let's talk about bunnies and flowers and fluffy, cuddly puppies and stuff like that now.
That'll be part 3.
I think part 3 may be too horrible to ever release to the public, Sage, you know, the way it's going here. But, you know, keep the faith, baby. All right, let's talk about what's next on the cheat sheet here.
We have the Imagined Peace Tower.
Oh, yes, the Imagined Peace Tower. Good old Yoko Ono appears on the scene here. The Imagined Peace Tower is actually an obelisk of light. It's over a wishing well allegedly containing over 1 million wishes. It's a satanic memorial, and it ain't to John Lennon. From his witchy poo wife, Yoko Ono. So, in Iceland, which is where it's located, it's called the Peace Column. And it's located on an island near Reykjavik, Iceland. The obelisk of light is projected into the night sky from a monument base that is a white stone with the words "Imagine Peace" carved into it in 24 languages. A language for each hour of the day. And of course, X is the 24th letter. So you've got 600. We talked about that.
Yep.
The light from Yoko Ono's Imagine Peace Tower, obelisk of light, it projects approximately 4,000 meters into the sky. And 4,000 meters equals 13,123 feet into the dark sky. Well, here's the point of that. If you take the height that the light projects from the Imagine Peace Tower, 13,123 feet, and you divide that number by the year that the Beatles officially disbanded, 1970, you get 6.66. So they're celebrating the death of the Beatles. Well, the Imagine Peace Tower obelisk of light was unveiled on October 9th, 2007, on John Lennon's 67th birthday. 6 plus 7 is 13. So counting from the date of John Lennon's cremation ritual on December 10th, 1980, to October 9th, 2007, when the Imagine Peace Tower obelisk of light was turned on John Lennon's birthday, covers a period of exactly 9,800 days, counting both dates. This is also exactly equal to 322 months. And of course, 322 is the number that's associated with the satanic skull and bones logo, the skull and the crossbones, and 322 beneath it. And 322, 3 times 22, 66.
Well, March 22nd is when the Beatles released their first album, Please Please Me, back in 1963.
Oh, great serve. Great serve, Sage. Now, Yoko has an EarthCam live feed set up at the Imagine Peace Tower obelisk of light. And unlike the Abbey Road live feed camera, which it's on 24 hours a day, this live feed camera updates every 3 minutes, which is equal to 60 seconds plus 60 seconds plus 60 seconds. Then there'll be another picture of what's going on. In simple gematria, the words Imagine Peace Tower add up to 169, which is the number 13 squared. 13 times 13 is 169. And by the way, when Hiroshima got nuked, that was 33 days after the 169th birthday of the United States. You know, just another nice touch there. The Imagine Peace Tower in the witches' gematria adds up to 1014, 1014. So the number 1014 is equal to 169 plus 169 plus 169 plus 169 plus 169 plus, what is it? 169. So 6 times 169 gives you the Imagine Peace Tower in the witches' gematria. The number 13 squared, 169, times 6 is 1014. And if you take 1014 divided by 9/11, you get 1.11. After September the 11th, after 9/11, there are 111 days remaining in the Gregorian calendar year. So 666 divided by 6 is 111. In the 1976 movie, The Omen, which I just watched the other night and is a masterpiece, I guess we should add that to the satanic Eyes Wide Shut, Rosemary's Baby, The Omen, trifecta there of Satanism. The 1976 movie, The Omen, had a running time of 1 hour and 51 minutes, which equals exactly 111 minutes in length. World War I ended on November the 11th at 11:11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month, 1111. And of course, in Satanism and number science, 11 is not only the first master number, it's also considered the evil number. 11 is the evil number. So 1014 divided by 9/11 is 1.11. In the Witch's Gematria Imagine Peace Tower that adds to 1014, guess what else does? The number 11, if you write it in words, the number 11. And August 6th, when Hiroshima was nuked, also adds up to 1014. So does Trump Tower. Would you like to talk about the Magical Mystery Tour? What the heck is the
Black Magical Mystery?
The
Black Magical Mystery Tour?
Thank you for correcting me. Yes, it is a Black Magical Mystery Tour. What's the mystery? Well, the mystery is the Magical Mystery Tour movie, and we'll talk about the album in a minute because that's part of it. The Magical Mystery Tour movie, as most people know, it begins with the Beatles as spell-casting witches, and Mal Evans is in there too, bless his heart, bless his memory. So the movie begins 10 miles north on the Dewsbury Road, where James Paul McCartney was ritually sacrificed by Satanists. While the Magical Mystery Tour album begins exactly 13 years to the day before John Lennon was ritually sacrificed by Satanists beneath the Arch of Baal at the Dakota building. So the Magical Mystery Tour movie starts with the death of Paul McCartney, and it ends with the album at the death of John Lennon. That's the mystery. And of course, we also remember from part 1 that the Rolling Stones on that same day, 13 years to the day, before John Lennon died, on the day Magical Mystery Tour album was released, the Rolling Stones released For Their Satanic Majesty's Request, which has the 4 Beatles, and in fact, Paul is on the left side of the album cover, farthest left, which is the west side where the sun sets, Seth, who killed Osiris. And the Magical Mystery Tour movie first originally aired on BBC One. BBC is 322 backwards, Skull and Bones number again. The Magical Mystery Tour movie is 52 minutes long, 13 times 4. The Magical Mystery Tour movie was first shown on December 26, 1967, which was 2 years to the day after the moped accident, Genesis of the Corpse. And the Magical Mystery Tour movie being shown on December 26, 1967, spans a period of 55 days, counting from the date of a solar eclipse on November the 2nd, 1967. During this little bit of information here, it's important to remember that James Paul McCartney himself was born 55 days before a solar eclipse. He met John Winston Lennon exactly 55 astronomical years after his father James McCartney's natal birth. Jane Asher, the gal pal of James Paul McCartney, was also born 55 days before a solar eclipse. And James Paul McCartney was born 2 degrees west and 53 degrees north. So you add 53 and 2 and you get 55 degrees. I misspoke again on part 1 when I mentioned about a 9/11 being involved in James Paul McCartney's geographical coordinates. What I was actually looking at when I misspoke, I was looking at my notes for that solar eclipse. So in that solar eclipse, 55 days after he was born, there's a 9/11 reference in there, but I won't go into it now. It's a little off course. The core principal photography of the movie version of Magical Mystery Tour was shot between a starting date of September the 11th, 1967, and then an end date of September 25th, 1967. The very last concert ever held at Candlestick Park, where the Beatles' last concert took place exactly 55 days before a lunar eclipse. Okay, in the movie Magical Mystery Tour, believe it or not, there's a little more weirdness there. They head west on the A30 in the movie, and at lunchtime, high noon, the Beatles, they left London in the Magical Mystery Tour psychedelic bus, and they headed for West Country. The West is where the sun sets. As the Magical Mystery Tour bus heads west on the old A30, which is 13, A1 and 3, 13, it stops at the Pied Piper restaurant in Winchester en route. The Pied Piper, of course, is well known as he blew his flute, his wind instrument, and all the rats followed him, and he marched them into the sea to their death. So keep in mind, William Wallace Shepard is playing his wind instrument, the cor anglais, when he's introduced on the Sgt. Pepper's album. He's a Pied Piper, in a way, but the rats are the Beatles fans, you know? He sang your rats, and I'm leading you, and you're too dumb to know it. So the Pied Piper blew his flute, his wind instrument, and he hypnotized all the rats, the Beatles fans, to follow him to his death into the sea. Sea, visual, sea. Sea in mathematical terms is the symbol for the velocity of the speed of light, you know, also. And it's also kind of a vague reference to the all-seeing eye of Horus, the sea. They call the Pope the Holy See, you know. The Pied Piper restaurant is in Winchester en route. The Winchester in America was a rifle that was the chief instrument of death. It was a death talisman that massacred most of the American Indians in the West, where the sun goes to die each day symbolically. And Winchester rifles are technically a wind instrument of fire in alchemy. Now, the interesting thing, too, about Magical Mystery Tour, the movie, the Magical Mystery Tour bus gets stuck on a small stone bridge in the shape of an arch, a stone arch, the Arch of Bel, Baal, Baal in symbolism. As cars get backed up behind the psychedelic Magical Mystery Tour bus, some of the people start to get angry, and John Lennon, he gets off the bus, and he rips placards off the side of the bus. This symbolizes John Lennon's anger and rage at the death of his great friend and songwriting partner, James Paul McCartney, and the death of the bus symbolically over the Arch of Bell, Ball, Baal. You know, when the Beatles for a few days or whatever came to a standstill, you know, they were stuck. And then the bus backs up for about a half a mile, and it takes off. The Magical Mystery Tour psychedelic bus stops in the town of Bodmin. Bod is slang for body. I like your bod, baby. And min can mean mine, it can mean minute, or it can mean Min, the ancient Egyptian god of reproduction. And he was the creator of all things. Min is actually, believe it or not, it's kind of pornographic because he's depicted as a male human with an erect phallus held in his left hand usually, and an upright flail held in his right hand. So you have the as above, you know, so below with Min, that guy too. And like we said earlier, Min's cult began and was centered at Coptos. And then there's that lyric from the song on the Abbey Road album, different album, where it goes, and so I quit the police department and got myself a steady job. And though she tried her best to help me, she could steal, but she could not rob. And as we know, the Beatles often change the he to she and the she to he. So if you put the he's in, it makes a little bit more sense. That song is She Came In Through the Bathroom Window from the Abbey Road album. So, you know, I think we've already explained the whole Coptos, six toes aspect.
Yeah.
And your fine research and work digging about the sole of the feet, which was, you know, just mind-blowing. The palm that's above the head of False Paul on the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album is designed to palm off William Wallace Shepard as James Paul McCartney onto the public. To palm off Paul M., palm, is a sleight of hand. It's trickery, deception, hocus pocus, focus. It's a legerdemain. It's a grifter's grave grift, essentially. And the palm also, on that album cover, they show palms, you know, by the Crowley, Haydn and all that, by the doors to the temple and all that. The palm also connects to Palmyra, Palmyra, which is where the original Temple of Baal was established in the year 32 BC at Palmyra, Syria. Now, check this out, Sage. You're going to love this. So, the Arch of Baal was established at Palmyra in the year 32 BC. There was no year 0, according to the Gregorian calendar. So, the year 1 is actually the year 33, counting from the establishment of the Temple of Baal at Palmyra. Year 1 is actually the year 33 to those guys. And it goes without saying, I shouldn't even have to say this, but, you know, ritual human sacrifices to Baal actually started out and took place at Palmyra in ancient times. Well, I guess we should get to finally talking about Billy Pepper. So we're going to talk about this guy, Billy Pepper. The name Billy Pepper is a double entendre wordplay, uniting the given name of William Wallace Shepard, as we know, Billy, to the fictional name of Billy Pepper, William and the Pepper Potts. And also it ties into the legendary name of Tom Pepper. In ancient nautical legends, Tom Pepper was known as the greatest liar in history. And according to the legend of Tom Pepper was kicked out of hell because he was a bigger and better liar than his satanic majesty, Satan himself. So the legend of Tom Pepper being kicked out of hell for being a bigger liar than Satan, the devil, dates back to at least the year 1787, usage in South Yorkshire, England. Tom Pepper is someone who is called a liar. So the band name of Billy Pepper and the Pepper Potts esoterically means William the Liar and the container of liars. You know, a pot can be a container, Pepper Potts, meaning that the rest of the band members are also liars. Now, since the word pot can mean many different things, it can mean the winnings in a poker game, the pot. The word pot can mean bank. It can mean kitty. It can mean a fund of money for communal use, as well as an ante, which is a financial stake put up by a player in a game of cards, as well as it can mean a vessel, a receptacle, a bowl, and or it can mean a cauldron. And who uses cauldrons? Witches do. Yeah, remember vats. Vats. Soothsayers. The field of the Vates, the Vati, where the Vatican was built. The root word of Vatican means cauldron, means witches, means soothsayers. So Billy Pepper and the Pepper Potts can also translate as William the Liar and the Stoned Liars. It can also mean William the Liar and the Cauldron of Liars. Okay, so this guy who had a death and resurrection himself, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, he symbolically died and was resurrected under the name Mark Twain. And Mark Twain was a 33-degree Freemason at least in the Polar Star Lodge number 79 of St. Louis. And he positioned to join that lodge December 26th, 13 plus 13, the day after Christmas, in 1860. The Freemason Mark Twain, he wrote a story called Remarkable Dream with the legendary character Tom Pepper, hell's greatest liar, in it. Now, in this short story, Remarkable Dream by Mark Twain, it's a story about four great liars who appear to Mark Twain, the author, conjured from the dying embers on the hearth, who one by one, individually, they appear before the author. The fourth liar, the last and the greatest of the liars to appear at Mark Twain's door in the story is, quote, the renowned Tom Pepper, who was such a preposterous liar that he couldn't get to heaven and they wouldn't have him in hell, end quote. Now, Mark Twain's Masonic influences can be perceived very readily in the short story Remarkable Dream in this paragraph, which will also correlate and Masonically harmonize and resonate to William Wallace Shepard, Billy Pepper, Tom Pepper, Billy Shears, Sergeant Pepper, It Was a Fake Mustache, and the Beatles. All that is tied in this excerpt. In this excerpt, Hell's Greatest Liar, Tom Pepper, he's basically extolling the great person named Armand Leonidas Fitz Smythe Amigo Stiggers. That's some name. He's talking about this guy, and he says that this guy's talent for lying, whom he describes as, here's the quote, a man with such a talent that is bound to achieve high distinction and do great service in our ranks. For this talent of his, more than for his wonderful abilities in distorting facts, I do hereby confer upon him the sublime order of the Knights of the Liars of St. Pepper, and present him with the symbol pertaining to the same, this grim, twisted, sharply projecting, sunburned mustache, whose fashion and pattern are only permitted to be used by those noble knights, whose nature it is to war against the truth wherever they find it, and to go a long, long way out of their road to prospect for the chances to lie. I am the only man the world ever produced who was so wonderful a romancer that he could neither get a show in heaven nor hell. And Fitz Smythe will be the second one. It will be jolly. It is lonesome now, but when Smythe comes, we two will loaf around on the outside of damnation and swap lies and be perfectly happy. Good day, old petrified facts, good day. And Tom Pepper, the most splendid liar the world ever gave birth to, was gone. That was my dream. That's Remarkable Dream by the Freemason Mark Twain. Now, in that same short story, the author believes the story to have been a dream. That's why he called it Remarkable Dream. For as much as 6 hours. So he believes it's a dream for 6 hours. And then just before 3 o'clock today, the author sees Armand Leonidas Fitz Smythe Amigo Stiggers coming out of an alley in real life. Quote, wearing that absurd sunburned mustache. I mean, which Tom Pepper gave him. So it was reality. It was no dream after all. The short story, Remarkable Dream, ends with the author lamenting and expressing great regret that the Reverend of the clergy, known as the Reverend Richard F. Putnam, has assumed the pastorate of the Church of the Advent in this city. And there was no man that is more sorry than I am to see him forsake the pleasant fields he was wont to tread and confine himself to a limited beat on the gospel, to a beat in a town which is small and where he cannot have full swing according to his dimensions, if I may so speak, in connection with matters pertaining to the scriptural line of business. So basically, the 33-degree Freemason Mark Twain is saying, gosh, it's really unfortunate that this great liar will have to confine his lies to the lies in the Gospels, because he's a much better liar than those liars. During the reprise in the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band song, the words Sgt. Pepper's Lonely is repeated 3 times. So those words, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely, repeated 3 times, contain the backmasked words, it was a fake mustache. The greatest liar in the Beatles, actually the Cheetles, while disguised as Paul McCartney, is not only confessing in reverse that the mustache is Machiavellian duplicity, that the fake mustache is lip service, which is an insincere agreement to consent in one's words while dissenting in one's heart, but that this Sgt. Pepper's Lonely fake mustache is also an occult signature reference to Tom Pepper's absurd sunburned mustache. Well, how do we know that? We know that because it is alleged that when James Paul McCartney died, he lost his head through decapitation, and he was also burned by fire, supposedly in a car crash. The date of the last Beatles recording session, when James Paul McCartney laid down vocals and tracks for his final song, was on the summer solstice, June 21st, 1966, when the sun is at its highest point in the northern hemisphere. And it seems to stand still for 3 days before the sun is symbolically decapitated on June 24th, the day before the anti-Christmas, and also the day before Global Beatles Day that we found out thanks to Vicky. June 24th is also the feast day of St. John the Baptist, who was also allegedly decapitated. So the Beatles' American record distributor label was Capitol Records. The root word in Capitol Records is kaput. And kaput in Latin, the dead language, literally means head. James Paul McCartney's decapitation 13 days after the last Beatles concert also decapitated Capitol Records. The German word kaput, spelled with a K, means finished, worn out, and or dead. So on June 24th, when the sun is also decapitated, that is also one day before little baby Satan Jr. was born in Rosemary's Baby on June 25th, 1966. So the words, he blew his mind out in a car, he didn't know that the lights had changed, takes on new symbolic meaning there. And for the record, counselor, John Lennon's mother, Julia, she was born at number 8 Head Street. Here's the cherry on top. In the witch's gematria, the words, it was a fake mustache, add up to 1116, 1116, which is 911 inverted. You know how you'll do the 9 and then you do the slash, which is longer, and then you do the 11?
Yep.
That's how it fits. And also, the star Sirius, spelled with an I this time, 2 I's, also adds up to 1116, 911 inverted, as does Mason, 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 as does Pontius Pilate, as does True Satanist, as does Apollyon Rising. So James Paul McCartney was sunburned on the summer solstice in 1966 when he recorded his last Beatles song, while the sun was highest and brightest in the sky, and that was also 33 days counting after a solar eclipse on May 20th, 1966, including both dates. So to wrap up, it was a fake mustache, an absurd sunburned mustache, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely, Billy Pepper's Lying, Tom Pepper's lying got him kicked out of hell for being a greater liar than Satan. Sergeant Pepper and the Lonely Hearts Beatles are lying to their fans and to the world. Sergeant Pepper, Billy Pepper, is the greatest liar in the Beatles. Sergeant Pepper, Billy Pepper, is the greatest liar in the world. Sergeant Pepper, Billy Pepper is a bigger and greater and more fantastic liar than the former record holder, Tom Pepper, the former greatest liar, caught between heaven and hell for all eternity.
People have always wondered where, Pepper came from. So the Billy Pepper, Sergeant Pepper, Tom Pepper connection makes sense to me, Richard. And especially when, the story you told us with about Tom Pepper being the greatest liar or deceiver, it fits. And I know a lot of people have struggled with, why did he choose Pepper?
Now we know. And for the record, also, it was a fake mustache. I did the gematria of that in the witches' gematria. Guess what that adds up to?
What is that?
1,116, 9/11, inverted. As does John Wilkes Booth, the Beast of the Earth, Don Vito Corleone, the Star Sirius, True Satanist, Supreme Talisman. Here's a postscript to the story, Mark Twain's Remarkable Dream. Here's a postscript. The author says that he believed that it was a dream for as much as 6 hours, and then the author discovers to his shock and horror that it was not a dream. It was actually reality just before 3 o'clock. So during Mark Twain's time, of course, clocks were rotary clocks with the two hands. At 3 o'clock on a rotary clock, one hand points to 12 while the other hand points to 3. 3 times 12 is 36. 6 times 6 is 36. And if you add together the first 36 numbers, 1 through 36, you get the sum of 666. It's most likely, I hate to say it, because I've been to Hannibal, where Mark Twain, where the cult of Mark Twain is currently located. I hate to say it, but it looks like Mark Twain was not only a Freemason, but he was probably a Satanist. He wrote many verses about Satan, including, quote, "But who prays for Satan?" Question mark, unquote. He wrote another one, quote, "I have always felt friendly towards Satan," unquote. And those were actually from Mark Twain's autobiography. And in a notebook that Mark Twain had in 1867, he calls Satan, quote, "Satan, the first consultant," unquote. And in the Witches' Gematria, this will shock you, the name Mark Twain adds up to 660. There's some gematria on Tom Pepper, but I'll save it. But one or two that I really need to say, in the Witches' Gematria, Tom Pepper adds up to 744, as does Liverpool, as does Tower of Babel, as does Baal worship, Baal worship, and as does the Mark of Cain, as does 9/11s with an S, as does Holy Land, as does Pope of Rome, as does Black Flame Sun, as does Devil's World, and as does JFK Airport, where the Beatles flew into when they landed in the Big Apple. And of course, the witch in Snow White gave a poisoned apple to Snow White. We know how that turned out. The title Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in Hebrew gematria adds up to 1648, as does 33rd degree Scottish Rite, as does 11 minutes after midnight. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in the Witches gematria adds up to 2124, as does Aleister Crowley Was Possessed, as does Rulers of Darkness of This World.
All right, so I guess where did you want to go next? We talked about, obviously, Billy Pepper, Tom Pepper.
Yeah, let me see where we are here.
We have Blackpool.
The song Blackpool is by False Paul William, and the song lyrics provided by Macca Lyrics at www.maccacentral.com. He gives a lot of very strange numbers in this song. For instance, it starts out Blackpool 38 23 38 Blackpool. That's the place for me. Southport 23 38 23 Southport. That's the place for me. I'm going to skip in because he talks about the chicks he likes, When he gets to the next number segment, he says Blackpool 38 23 38 Blackpool. That's the place for me. Margate 29 42 28 Margate. That's the place for me. Then he goes into the chicks he likes again. Margate 28 39 23 Margate. That's the place for me. Let me tell you about Southport. Southport 53 23 43 Southport. That's the place for me. Then he goes into the chicks he likes again. He comes back to Blackpool 38 23 38 Blackpool. That's the place for me and the place for you. And the song ends. When you add up all the numbers that he sings about in the official Blackpool lyrics, in Hebrew gematria, if you say the word or write the word hell, Hell, 13 times, you get the number 689, which is what all those numbers add up to. So he's coding the word hell 13 times in gematria in that song. And here's a little graph of that.
But Richard, couldn't somebody say that he could have been coding another word?
Oh, sure. There's probably way more to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't really go into the Margate, Southport, and all that, but here's my hunch. Here's my hunch, Beatles fans. James Paul McCartney's buried in an unmarked grave at Blackpool. That's the place for me. And I have some other reasons that I'm working on that I'm not really ready to share yet. But my intuition is going off. Billy's telling us that's where James Paul McCartney is. He's at Blackpool. And the Beatles at Blackpool on August the 1st, they played their live in 1965 on that date. The backdrop features the distorted six-sided star hexagram with a black figure trapped inside of the hexagram. And, we know hexa means witch. It's a hex. It's another example of the hex death. This date August the 1st, 1965 at Blackpool is 13 months before the last Beatles concert at Candlestick Park. The Beatles also performed the song Help during this concert at Blackpool. It actually looks like the figure in the distorted hexagram is screaming for help 13 months before the last Beatles concert. When the Beatles perform their final concert on the stage at Candlestick Park, they're standing directly over the sigil of Baphomet, also known as the symbol of heaven and earth. It's right below the stage. You know, that's where that phrase, look out below, comes in. And they didn't even realize it. Technically speaking, John Lennon was murdered by a corpse. I know that's hard to believe. Yeah, apparently somebody physically clawed their way out of the ground, picked up a gun, and killed him. It wasn't Mark David Chapman. Now that sounds a little kooky, but I'll explain. Let me go to this character. Do you know who Frank Sturgis was? He was one of the Watergate.
He was a CIA assassin,
yes! Right? You win the donkey.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. You've just saved me some explanation. He was a part of the CIA's Operation Hit Squad known as, Operation 40. Now, the interesting thing about Frank Sturgis is his FBI file on him, who was actually born Frank Fiorini. So I guess he had a death and resurrection too, in name anyway. His FBI file is almost twice as lengthy as the FBI files on Watergate and the John F. Kennedy assassination combined. That's because he was involved in both of them. So, he got talked about and written about a lot. In a taped interview, deathbed confession in January 2004, CIA asset E. Howard Hunt claimed that Lyndon Johnson instigated the JFK assassination and that the operation was organized by Cord Meyer, David Atlee Phillips, David Sanchez Morales, and Frank Sturgis. The FBI file on Frank Sturgis is over 75,000 pages altogether. Both David Sanchez Morales and Frank Sturgis worked closely with the head of the CIA Operation 40 assassination squad leader, Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, and he organized it and put it all together. Frank Sturgis also worked with Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo on the CIA's Bay of Pigs debacle. Contract killer, CIA asset, and Watergate plumber Frank Sturgis claimed, without proof, that Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, quote, died of natural causes in 1974, end quote, 6 years before the satanic ritual murder of John Lennon in 1980. Frank Sturgis also said that the Perdomo family was not notified about his alleged death until after his funeral. Keep in mind, John Lennon never had a funeral, by the way. And neither did James Paul McCartney, a public one anyway. And the guy that allegedly killed John Lennon, Mark David Chapman, he never had a public trial. They just slapped the crazy sticker on his forehead and locked him up.
Right.
So anyway, 6 years after his death, Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, who recruited professional contract killers for the CIA through Operation 40, he popped up in the bronze Masonic Temple guard booth with the pyramidion roof topped with the Masonic forget-me-not sigil, fully in charge of the lack of security for the very high-profile former Beatle, John Lennon, on December 8th, 1980, 13 days before the winter solstice. That's also 13 years to the day after the Beatles released Magical Mystery Tour album, etc., etc. Therefore, according to an expert in the art and science of premeditated murder and assassination planning strategy, a man with an FBI file bulging with over 75,000 pages, John Lennon was murdered by a corpse beneath the Arch of Baal at the sinister Dakota building. The CIA contract killer who said that the Dakota building doorman in charge of security the night that John Lennon got dead, Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, he died 6 years earlier. Frank Sturgis was born 13 days before the winter solstice, while John Lennon was murdered 13 days before the summer solstice. Revolution 9 is a very specific occult signature in the murder of John Lennon. Revolution 9, the song, is the longest song released by the Beatles. Its length is 8 minutes and 22 seconds. Revolution 9 was released on the Beatles' White Album on November 22nd, 1968, on the 5th anniversary of the satanic ritual human sacrifice of President John F. Kennedy. The color of a dead body, by the way, is white. The actual murderer of John Lennon was Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, a former chief of police during the regime of the Cuban president Carlos Prio, who went into exile after the Cuban Revolution. There's that word. When Fidel Castro seized power in 1959 from Batista. During the Bay of Pigs counter-revolution on April 16, 1962, Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo was a key member of Brigade 2506. 2 plus 5 plus 0 plus 6 equals 13. At the moment that John Lennon was shot, Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo was standing the closest to John Lennon, just to John Lennon's left side. This is very important because on John Lennon's certificate of death, it states that he died from, quote, multiple gunshot wounds of the left shoulder and chest, left lung, and left subclavian artery, external and internal hemorrhage, which means bleeding, and shock. The subclavian artery branches off directly from the arch of the aorta, which actually sits atop the human heart. John Lennon was shot and killed beneath the arch of Baal in the guise of the archway at the Dakota building. The first shot that was fired by Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo into John Lennon's chest ruptured his aortic arch, his arch of the aorta. He was shot in the arch of the aorta, the kill shot, which is the first shot. Because when he's fallen or whatever after the first shot, that's when the other shots go in the side and neck. On a kill zone target, based upon basic human anatomy, this area of the chest is lethal zone A and is also known as a kill switch, as in Turn Me On Dead Man, which is also a back masked kill switch. Kill and switch. James Paul McCartney in Fall. A kill switch is one of two primary specific areas of the human body that, when impacted by a bullet, will dispatch the threat immediately. The two primary areas of the body that are considered to be kill switches are the head and the chest. In the song Revolution 9, the lyric that states, "I'm not in the mood for wearing clothing," when played in reverse, reveals the phrase, "There were two, there are none now." The two that once were, but are now none, are the songwriting team known as Lennon-McCartney. The stereo master of the song Revolution 9 was completed on the Anti-Christmas, June 25th, 1968, which is also Global Beatles Day, as well as Baby Satan Jr.'s birthday and Rosemary's Baby. In verse 6 of the song Revolution 9, someone says, quote, "Only to find the night watchman unaware of his presence in the building," unquote. The night watchman on December 8th, 1980 was Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, and the building was the kill zone known as the Dakota building. In the song Revolution 9, the phrase number 9 is heard exactly 100 times. When played in reverse, the words number 9 reveal the phrase, "Turn me on, dead man." There are 9 letter O's in the names John Winston Ono Lennon and Yoko Ono. John Lennon was first shot in his aortic arch, and in a human being, the arch of the aorta is shaped in the form of the number 9. John Lennon always said that the number 9 was his lucky number. So some Satanist, occultist, black magic sorcerer said, "Oh, really? We got something planned for you, buddy."
Oh, and he sang the song number 9, Tree.
I'd forgotten that. Thank you. Yes. John Lennon's certificate of death states that the hour of his death was at 11:15 p.m. You have an 11, and the 1 plus 5 is 6, which is 9 inverted. There's a 9/11. And also 11 times 6 equals 66. On a rotary clock, the small hand points to the 11, while the big hand points to the 3. 11 times 3 is 33. In the witch's gematria, the word aorta adds up to 330. Now, here you can find a better screen capture. I think I've sent you a couple, or you can find some. But here's what the arch of the aorta looks like, looking like the number 9. Can you see that?
Yep, you sent me that picture. Yeah.
So he was shot right up here. That's where the left subclavian artery goes to. He never would have survived that shot.
No, that's the thing. That's why it was a professional assassin, because Jose knew exactly where.
And not only that, too, Sage, you're right, but it was easy. This was probably the easiest kill he ever had. Because keep in mind, Perdomo is standing to John Lennon's immediate left, where the guardhouse is that he came out of, and Mark David Chapman is behind and to the right. So how the hell is he going to shoot John Lennon in the chest? It's impossible. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
and the doctors, they know an entrance wound from an exit wound, you know? And even if John Lennon turned, he's not going to turn to his left if he hears the voice coming to his right rear. He's going to turn this way.
Well, the other thing that's disturbing, Richard, wasn't Yoko right there?
God, you must be reading my mind.
That's the thing that always got me. She was standing right there. So if it wasn't Mark David Chapman and it was the doorman.
And Right, and if Mark
Perdomo.
David Chapman was actually the one doing the firing, Yoko could have got hit because she had gone in ahead of him. And she went past the
Yeah,
arch.
the whole thing
And
never
they
made sense
got
to
him
me.
right at the
Yeah.
arch. When the witch, Yoko Ono, first met John Lennon at the Indica Gallery on November 9th, 1966, she silently walked over to John Lennon and handed him a card with the word breathe written on it. At the moment of John Lennon's satanic hex death, he was shot first in his aortic arch, which conveys oxygenated blood from the left ventricle of the heart to all of the human body except to the lungs. From the night that the witch, Yoko Ono, met John Lennon on November 9th, 1966 at the Indica Gallery to the night that John Lennon died on December 8th, 1980 at the Dakota building spans a period of exactly 169 months to the day. That's the number 13 squared. 13 times 13 equals 169 months. The Perdomo surname includes two ancient names that mean home and or house in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The word per, P-E-R, means house, while in Latin, the dead language, the word domus means home, as in domicile. Also, in the Japanese language, the word domo, used by itself, is interpreted as thank you. A major domo is someone who makes arrangements or directs affairs, for another. The major domo is the person who has the authority to act, to use force within a set limit of strict boundaries. There is no greater boundary than the boundary between life and death, let me tell you. The surname of Perdomo in esoteric meaning incorporates Egyptian, Latin, and Japanese words that combine to form house or houses, house of thanks, and houses of thanks, and houses of thanks are known as temples. This brings us back to that bronze guard booth that the senior doorman of the Dakota building dwelt in on the night of John Lennon's murder. Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, he was the one who dwelt in that little Masonic temple house, and he was housed in a Masonic temple beneath a pyramid roof that had the forget-me-not flower on it, which is a 5-petal flower. And the flower, if you look at it, it's opening up. So they're basically saying, what we're going to do here tonight is going to resonate through all eternity, and, you won't forget it, believe me.
Is that a Baphomet ring you have on your right hand?
Technically, I guess when it's this way, horizontally, it's a rune. Thank you for noticing, by the way. But if you turn it this way, then it's there it is. But see, this gets to
Double
your
X's.
point. Just because I have this on, people might think, oh my God, he's evil. Kill it. But no, we're using their own sorcery against them. Just like the words sage of Quay add up to 666. Now, some people will hear that or read that and see that and they'll freak out. But this is almost like you're part of the universe's emergency response system. You've incarnated here on Earth to straighten out a lot of this stuff, to bring light on it. And you're basically almost sometimes when you're not knowing it, or now you're starting to pick up on it, you're using their own system against them. If they're all wearing hexagons for protection, you're using it right back. It's wild.
Well, this is what I say to people. People want to think that the numbers are evil and that a triangle is evil and the symbolism. And I explain to them that it's like electricity. So if somebody says, is electricity good or bad? Well, it depends on the intent of the person who's
Right.
using electricity. Because it could be used for both. Good. Lights your house? Good. Destruction? Bad. It's the same thing. So, see, and that's the thing. They've commandeered the symbolism, Richard. They really have. They've commandeered it. And it's very difficult to get even, very well-intentioned, good people to understand that and to get over that hump or get over that hurdle. It's very tough because people have asked me, my first album has the pyramid and the eye in the center of it, and they think that that's Illuminati stuff, and I try to explain to them that this is sacred symbolism, and I'm using it just as you had just said. I'm using it for the purposes of good.
And it's a fact. You can't take a number like 666. The number itself, it's a number. It's not evil. It's just a number. It's the way they're using it. And, you're throwing it back in their face. And evil can't keep going on that course without a course correction of good and the pendulum swinging back the other way. I guess it's all part of the divine plan or something. It's really breathtaking in its scope.
I'm releasing the show that I did, the Roundtable with Memoirs, and I'm releasing it on September 11th. And I've already had a number of comments and people reach out to me and say, why are you using an evil occult date to release that show? And I said, the reason why it's going out on 9/11 is because that's the day that we believe that biological Paul passed away.
Right.
That's the only reason why it's going out on that day. But people automatically apply some negative, dark intent, to numbers and specific dates. And I don't know, it's tough to get people off that belief system and that, that understanding, which is a false.
And they do the same thing with guns. They say guns are evil. Well, guns aren't evil if you're using it to protect yourself from somebody breaking into your house. The gun is just a gun. The gun can't kill anybody on its own. Right. It's only the use. And it's the same with the numbers.
Right. Exactly. All right. I just thought I would point that out because I did see the ring, and I did it intentionally because if other people see the ring, if I decide to use a piece of the video or whatever, somebody without a question of a doubt will jump in and think they're making, a major discovery. So there you go.
Well, good for them, but yeah, we're basically reclaiming ownership of, sacred numbers and things that have been perverted. You were perverted, you were inverted to, George Harrison.
Right. Well, my guitar gently weeps. And Manly P. Hall says in his book, Secret Knowledge of All Ages, I think I got that right, that the mysteries were perverted, that white divine magic was commandeered and used for nefarious reasons, or black magic. So anyway, we digress.
Oh, I'm glad we did, because you pointed out some basic great things. The pendulum is swinging back the other way. There's one last thing I guess we should say. Well, actually, there's a couple little things. When Mark David Chapman had that book, Catcher in the Rye, on that cover, the two biggest words in that title are catcher and rye, I think, which alludes to the Eye of Horus, because they're basically saying catch your eye.
Yeah.
Catch your eye, catch your eye. It appears that immediately after Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo executed John Lennon, that his words to the patsy, Mark David Chapman, "Do you know what you've done?" was some kind of trigger. And it triggered the satanic pharmakos. A pharmakos is a goat. In ancient Rome, they used to lead a goat out of the city. Rome is a walled city. Strangely enough, with a wall, it was still the most sacked city in history. So, walls don't always work out, but they would lead a goat out through the gates, and they did rituals where they dumped all of the sins of the Roman people onto that goat, And then they lead it out symbolically through the gate, and then they sacrifice the goat. And it's like, woo, all our sins are gone now. They're all washed away. We're bona fide now. Kind of like that old Brother, Where Art Thou movie, So anyway, he says to the patsy, do you know what you've done? It's some kind of trigger. And then, supposedly he replied, Mark David Chapman replied, I just shot John Lennon. And physically, it says in many places, first of all, they didn't mention the name Perdomo for at least 6 years after the murder, like he never existed. And then finally some other people did digging and his name came out. And one of the sources, actually several sources, said that Perdomo kicked the gun away from him. Oh, did he? Or did he shoot him and then drop the gun and kick it away? And kick it,
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? The handgun that killed John Lennon is called a Charter Arms 38 handgun. So supposedly, Chapman sat down and pulled out the book Catcher in the Rye, because I guess the book My Pet Goat, wasn't available. So he thought, well, I can't read that. I'll read this book here. Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo was 1,965 days old when his future murder victim, John Lennon, was born. May 25th, 1935, up to and including October 9th, 1940, equals 1,965 days. This means, that from the birth of John Lennon's murderer to the birth of John Lennon, the murder victim himself, the moon had made exactly 66.6 orbits of the Earth. From the birth of the killer to the birth of the soon-to-be dead Beetle. I have more, Your Honor, but I'll rest my case.
Okay.
Perdomo is the killer. Send cards and letters to me. Guess what, people? It wasn't the way we were told, once again. Now, how's a guy going to shoot a guy in the chest from the back?
The shooting was done by somebody who knew exactly where to hit the body in order to kill somebody.
Right. He knew the kill spot. It was a simple thing.
Right.
The other guy calls out Mr. Lennon to catch his attention. Boom. He gets you right. And that's why there's no autopsy report released to the public to this day on John Lennon. On the day that John Lennon was ritually sacrificed on December 8th, 1980, Mars, the planet of war and strife, was in exact opposition to the sacred star, Sepsothis Sirius A, and in exact opposition to where Pluto, the planet of death and regeneration, was located on the day that Frank Sturgis was born at 13 degrees in Cancer. So, enough of Frank Sturgis and Mr. Perdomo until I hear from their lawyers. Yeah, I think we can just wrap it up by talking about just two key things that the memoirs of Billy Shear's book, the blue version, says that will go head to head with archaeoccultology, and let's see which one's standing here. One of them, we go back to the date on October 24th, 1963. According to memoirs by Thomas E. U. Harriot, let's plug him, on page 369, that's an interesting page number.
Yep.
During the evening, John Lennon and James Paul McCartney took a ceremonial blood oath to Lucifer. He doesn't say blood oath, but that's what they are. I inserted blood oath, so for technical reasons. So he says they took a ceremonial oath to Lucifer on October 24th, 1963, who is the god of this world. so that the Beatles would achieve success and worldly influence. That was a Thursday, by the way. This ceremonial pact between the Beatles, John Lennon, and James Paul McCartney, just those two Beatles, and Lucifer on October 24th, 1963, took place exactly 13 months plus 13 days after the Illuminati launched its war on Christianity on September 11th, 1962. So that's a pretty big one, but there's still a bigger one. And this is the one, this is the key fact, just like on the drum, where we get the date September the 11th on, the album cover of Sgt. Pepper's. So let's go to this date that Tom U. Harriet talks about, September 11th, 1962. September 11th, 1962 equals the date that the Illuminati selected to launch its war on Christianity. They predetermined that the media would spin whatever song the Beatles record on that date to become their first #1 hit. That was a quote from the book, and it's from Memoirs of Billy Shears on page 116, which is 9/11 inverted. Counting from September 11th, 1962, the date that the Illuminati launched its war on Christianity, to December 10th, 1980, 2 days after the murder of John Lennon, and on the day of his cremation ritual ceremony, which Yoko Ono was in charge of that, the witch, spans exactly 6,666 days, including both dates. Now, that's case closed. Memoirs of Billy Shears is not fiction. It's fact. Deal with it, people. Grow up. It's time for the Adult Swim here. There is no way on earth that even that brilliant encoder, Thomas E. U. Harriet, would have known to even research that. Nobody would tell him that. I don't even know that William knows that. He might. He's such a supreme, occultist. There's no way the guy, the author of that, the encoder of that book, is going to know that. An archaeocultologist is going to know it. So archaeocultology has just proven that Memoirs of Billy Shears is real. It's true. It's reality. Your time has not been wasted. All the videos and podcasts and broadcasts that you've done on it, you spent your time well, my friend.
Well, thank you, Richard. It resonated with me, and I put a video out that explained my take on the quote-unquote fiction and memoirs, and it consists of what people will not or do not accept or believe. So in other words, if people do not believe in numerology or gematria, then when they get to that part of the book, they discount it and it becomes their fiction. If they do not believe in the occult in general, and when Billy talks about the occult in memoirs, then the occult becomes fiction. So I believe the way the book is structured, and I did run this by Tom, and he told me I was on the right track. The fiction in the book is determined by the reader. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
The reader is the one that discounts whatever it is they won't believe or accept or investigate or research. So when they set it aside, that becomes fiction for them.
That makes perfect sense.
And that's what they did in memoirs.
That's what you call a loophole, yeah.
I'm not saying that there aren't little things here and there in memoirs which are fictional accounts, but they are not major things. They are very minor, tucked inside the narrative. The big piece of it is playing against people's embedded belief systems. That's
Right.
fiction. That's what I've deducted.
So archaeocultology has proven that memoirs of Billy Shears is true, it's fact, it's real, and vice versa. So they went head to head, and they're both left standing. They both independently corroborate and enforce one another. You can get to the truth through memoirs of Billy Shears. You can get to the truth through archaeocultology, probably a number of other ways too. It proves the science of archaeocultology. Archae means ancient, occult means hidden, and ology is the study of. It's the study of the ancient hidden in the modern day. And, if I could have proven that the book is bullshit, I would have reported it. But I can't. And I have no stake in the outcome one way or the other. It doesn't matter to me if it's true or not true, when you get right down to it.
Right.
But it's true.
Yeah. Same
or
thing
I
with
could
me.
be mistaken.
It's the same thing with me. People won't believe that I don't have a stake in it. I've been accused of working with Tom. I've been accused of working for Billy, which is ridiculous. I don't work for Tom or work with Tom. It's the same thing with me, Richard. When I got into the book, it was because it was very interesting to me. And it propelled me to go dig deeper.
It resonated with you.
Yes, yes. And if the book were bullshit, me too, I would have said, you know what? I'm doing the research and this stuff is not panning out. It's not aligning. It's bullshit. And set it aside. But what happened was, it's the same thing that happened with you. As I was going through the book, now we did it in different ways because I don't have your level of expertise at all with the occult, but I was going about it in a different way. And when I was doing it, I was finding it very difficult to debunk the book. I would find that on all the major points in the book, that it was true, that these things were truthful. And so if you keep going down the road and you're clicking one thing off after another, it's not like you just prove one thing. But if you're proving 10, 15, or 20 things to be true or valid, you have to come to the conclusion that the book contains truth. I mean, that's just me. That's just silly old me. And, how I went about it in my way of thinking. So it's good to hear your perspective on it because you came to the same conclusion that I did, but you came about it in a different way.
Right. And not only is the memoirs of Billy Shears proof of truth, it's profound sacred truth. It's deep. It's even deeper than he knew in coding it,
Yeah.
And when he finds all this stuff out, maybe his mind will get blown, or maybe he'll say, I knew it all the time,
I don't know. I know Tom knows a lot about this stuff. I know he's, I've gathered that he knows about the occult. Otherwise, I'm not so quite sure he would have been able to tie the book together the way he did. As an example, we noticed the page numbers, inverted 911, 369, the page number that was talking about the ritual. Somebody who has occult knowledge of numbers and stuff like that would know enough to pair that narrative with those page numbers, tying the numbers to the words type of thing,
Right.
But that's all I've been able to gather. I've never had a conversation with Tom and say, are you an occultist? I've never had a conversation like that. But in any case,
if he's a Mason, he's an occultist, to some extent.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying he's going around doing a black mass or anything like that, but, occult means hidden. So if you're a Mason, you're kind of up doing some hidden things. They're not all nefarious,
Right. Well, good point.